Niasari is an award-winning writer-director who grounds her work with lived experiences and hopeful joy. Shayda had its world premiere at the Sundance Film Festival earlier this year, where it won the World Audience Award. It was also announced as the Australian submission for the 2024 Academy Awards. Shayda is in Australian cinemas from October 5th. Noora, thank you so much and welcome to the For Your Reference podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I felt a lot. I loved a lot watching this film, and I can't wait to talk about Shayda with you. But I would love to start off by saying congratulations on the win at Sundance, as well as the submission into the Academy Awards.
Thank you so much. It's incredibly exciting and humbling to be representing Australia in this way.
Something that I really loved about the film, and, obviously no spoilers, but also obviously it's based on, experiences in your life as well. There was a tribute title card saying, "For my mother and the brave women of Iran." And it's so important to be able to talk about film and talk about experiences. And I want to, talk about the decision on film versus documentary. In the Sundance video, as well as in interviews, you talked about wanting to fill in the gaps of your childhood by getting your mum to write a memoir. And I would love to hear all the 10 different feature films that can come out of that as well. But I would love to hear about the decision of, creating a narrative film as opposed to a documentary.
Yeah, I mean, the film itself, it's inspired by our experience. So, there's a lot of fictional elements. It's definitely emotionally autobiographical.
Mm-hmm.
It's very true to, the core of our experience, but at the same time, it's a piece of cinema. And so when I was in the writing process, it was really about finding the cinematic potential of the story beyond, the I guess documentary details of our lives.
It's like distilling the essence of experience.
Exactly. Yeah, distilling the essence, and I felt that the essence was really about the bond between the mother and the daughter. Really grounding the film in their love and their connection, and how that is able to kind of like transcend all of the difficulties that they're facing through that bond. And I wanted the audience to really, be alongside them in that journey. Like, it's a very intimate exploration of their relationship and their day-to-day, struggles, and also the celebration and the color and joy of Persian New Year. So, it was important for me to create a framework for the story. And that framework, obviously it's a very narrative consideration. When you say, okay, I'm going to focus it on the time after the escape, when they're starting their lives in the women's shelter, making decisions like not to show flashbacks, not to show the thing that they escaped from, but for the audience to really sit in the tension and suspense of, what is she afraid of? What is the potential danger after an escape? And that really takes you into her psychology. So I really wanted to find this framework through narrative over a documentary, because I think that it becomes more universal.
Yeah.
Once you create those constraints and frameworks for a story.
I think the themes also feel universal as well. And I think there is a bit of a layer of distance in a narrative sort of film in being able to maybe not have those experiences, but be like, I understand what it's like to not be safe as a woman in this particular moment. You spoke on the tone of the film, and I guess being able to play in that. There are many happy, joyful moments that I definitely want to talk about, driven through Mona's character. But what I really loved about Shayda was the ability to go there and to really go there and to stay there. And,
Mm.
it may be in some instances be seen as uncomfortable, but uncomfortability isn't going to get in the way of truth and experiences as well.
Yeah, definitely. I it was an interesting parallel because, for me, I wasn't thinking about, the outcome of the film, what it would what it would be in the world. When I was making the film, I was very present in a very day-to-day experience. And that's what the actors were bringing as well. And Zar, who plays Shayda, she's such a remarkable performer, and she's just able to lock into a situation and bring out the best in anyone she's in a scene with.
Yeah.
Her presence and her ability to experience those joys to the fullest. And whenever her and Selena, who plays Mona, would be playful and would be dancing, and it was everyone had a smile on their face on set, because you just felt the realness of their connection. And that was such a beautiful thing to be able to capture, because it's so much about that, about the love between them and their ability to be really present in the joy, because it can be really fleeting.
Yeah, there's joy in moments, absolutely, and we live in those moments or in between those moments.
Exactly. And in the film, I was very conscious of creating this rhythm of of hope and then fear, and then hope and then fear. It's like you don't sit in one feeling for too long, because that's really the experience of people in those situations, like my mother and I. It's fleeting. All the emotions are fleeting, because at any moment there something could shift your lives dramatically. It's a roller coaster, but I'm really happy about the way that the film is able to take the audience on that journey, to really experience what life is like for a woman living in a women's shelter, trying to find freedom and autonomy for her life. I feel like it's authentic in the portrayal of this experience.
DV is definitely something that gets touched on in the film. We don't need to go into too much detail if you don't want to.
Yeah.
But I guess I just want to commend you on so much love and care that was poured into the film. I think it's important to, to be able to explore these sorts of issues, but have it being filmed in a very safe way. And that's definitely how it felt on a literal level as well as symbolic levels of, the film being set in a women's refuge and throughout.
Yeah, I mean, it was, my key priority was, first of all, like protecting Selena from the material. Like, she was 6 years old.
Yeah.
So she never really knew what's going on. We always protected her, and I got very maternal in that way. And obviously in a meta way, she's kind of my inner child.
Yeah.
And she's a very joyful kid and hasn't experienced any kind of trauma. Her parents are together. She has a really happy life. And so, I went to great lengths to protect her, and everyone was on the same page, the cast. We would set up all of these child safe situations. And so, I think that's a really successful outcome, that she's just really unaffected by the experience. But it was like it set up a framework for everyone, because we had a lot of times where there was a closed set, so only the essential crew were there. There was a quietness and a sensitivity to what was being discussed on set. And then, you know, that just became habitual for the crew, even when Selena wasn't there. If we had like a double, or if it was just the adults doing their scenes, there just became this softness and gentleness to the set, which, you know, was really important, because a lot of the women in the film, you know, the actors and Zar, you know, we all collectively have been through similar experiences and had this, you know, unspoken understanding of what that trauma is. And we held space for each other. You know, it just became this really loving, healing journey together that we went on. And, you know, I hope that comes through in the film, because you know, that's an unforgettable experience for me, being able to make this film with such strong, beautiful women. And it was a wonderful journey.
It absolutely comes through. And I think, you know, in the 2020s, I think film audiences are a bit more conscious of, I guess, how the sausage is made. Like, people care about, people care about the production. So I'm like sitting there with my hand like in front of my face, but I'm like, we're going to be okay. But I'm like, I hope they're going to be okay. But, you know, there was definitely that feeling of love and safeness and surrounding the warmth around there as well, which I think also comes to the importance of people telling their own stories, you know. Where you would feel that exploitative sort of lens maybe decades ago, where we weren't in control of our own stories. It's so important to have that. And I definitely felt that watching Shayda.
Oh, thank you so much. That means a lot to me. And yeah, I agree. It's really rare for especially like women of color to be able to tell their stories and be the authors of their stories. And, you know, I just feel so grateful to everyone who backed this film, who believed in my vision, and, you know, especially my cast who understood how personal this was to me, who could see, you know, when I would get triggered, and, you know, they were able to hold space for me and me for them. And especially, you know, it was especially interesting working with Osama Sami, who plays Hossein.
He was in Tennyson, and I interviewed him in Palangi at the Sydney Film Festival. I was like, I know this fella. Hello.
Yeah. He's such an amazing human being. I mean, he has this sense of humor, you know, obviously because he comes from a stand-up comedy background as well. And, you know, he was just able to break the tension on set, you know, between takes. And, you know, he would, you know, we'd do a really intense scene, and then he'd be like, okay, here's the musical version. And he would start singing, and everyone would laugh. And, you know, it was, everybody had the understanding of how challenging the material was. But I think there was a, you know, just a collective spirit of, you know, taking care of one another. Which, you know, it meant a lot. And I also had, we also had an on-set therapist for part of the shoot, which was really meaningful. And yeah, I think it's challenging that these kinds of stories, I feel like in the industry and in terms of funding bodies and budgets, and like there isn't a lot of awareness about the psychological, mental kind of duty of care required. And I, you know, I only had the on-set therapist for a week of the 6-week shoot, you know, and I wanted to have her for the entire time, but it wasn't a budget consideration. Like it wasn't something that there was money for, even though I fought really hard for it. But it's definitely something that needs to be implemented, you know, because there's a cost to telling our stories. And, you know, it's a duty of care. And, you know, I really hope that Shayda can be an example of how we can potentially, move forward in terms of creating those systems to protect us and to allow us to keep telling these stories, but in a way that's sustainable.
Yeah. I love that, because there is a cost to telling stories, and the profit sometimes isn't ours.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it's a huge privilege to make a film, especially these days. And obviously I'm I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity and for this platform that I'm building now.
Mm-hmm.
But I do want I do want there to be, changes and shifts in terms of, how people of color, especially, and women, are protected in their emotional well-being, is, given priority in telling the stories. So it's a long journey. I think it's a long process, because it's new that we're able to be authors of our narratives, and we have to push for, some systematic change, and
like genuine, meaningful change, not tokenistic.
Yeah, it's like, oh, there's no budget line for on-set therapist for the entire shoot. I'm like, well, let's make one. It's not that hard. It's
like, this isn't like a barbecue at Bunnings. Like, we're talking about some real shit. Like, we need that cultural safety.
Yeah, totally. Because I went into like a really deep depression after the shoot. Mm-hmm. Like, I was at rock bottom, and I was really blessed to have the editor that I had. She's just like the funniest, warmest, beautiful, Iranian woman who I brought out from California to Castlemaine, the town where I live, and we did the editing there, and she just picked me up. Like, she was just able to make me laugh and, get things back into perspective. And she was full of energy, and it just kind of enlivened me, the friendship with her and collaboration with her. And, I was very lucky, but it was very tough. It was like incredibly tough to get through the post-production stage, because I was at that, very dark place after the shoot. Mm-hmm. Imagine making a film about your childhood trauma.
Yeah.
And, having to relive everything, but also with a smile on your face, and directing actors. Mm-hmm. And, it was probably the biggest challenge of my life, making this film.
Yeah. And I felt it. And I know a lot of other people will resonate with that as well. I was born and raised in Western Sydney. So it was a beautiful, multicultural, I guess on the pamphlet would say. But it was so great. You know what I'm saying. But it was so great to experience different cultures, and that sort of thing. But, we've talked about whether it's funding, whether it's appetite, whether it's, the capacity to have storytellers tell their own stories. It's such a beautiful thing to see. We still need to get somewhere, but we are still seeing more stories being told. It's good to be able to see, different stories and real stories being told in a culturally safe way. And Shayda centers on the Persian New Year. How was it being able to not just tell a story, but be able to have touch points that resonate with you and so many others? Yeah,
I mean, the thing is that the Shayda and Mona, they're Iranian, right? Mm-hmm. But they're starting a new life in Australia, and they're surrounded by women from all different cultures. The head of the women's shelter, she's an Indigenous woman.
Leah Purcell, love. Purcell. We haven't even talked about the cast yet, but love.
I adore her. She's so fierce. She's a fierce mama. And she has this maternal energy. Nobody wants to fuck with her in this film or in real life. But yeah, I think it's just so reflective of our society. The house is it's a very specific situation, but it does reflect, what's really the makeup of Australia. It's a multicultural place, and you know, I'm so proud that I was able to create, you know, this little microcosm of how I experienced growing up in Australia.
Yeah.
And you know, being able to represent all different cultures and to show that, you know, domestic violence, it doesn't discriminate, you know, it's all different cultures, different socioeconomic backgrounds, doesn't matter how much money you have, doesn't matter where you come from. It affects everyone. And it's, you know, I think that's a real misconception as well.
And we see layers of that in Shayda as well.
Exactly. You know, it's a universal experience, and it's one that binds all of the women. In terms of, you know, they have this shared trauma, but it's unspoken.
Yeah.
And they were able to hold space for each other, and the friendships, you know, develop over the course of the film. And there's so much beauty in that, in terms of, you know, finding a connection with a stranger, but you know, there's an inner depth to what they share. And yeah, I'm really proud that I was able to, you know, bring those experiences to the screen, because we don't see enough of these kinds of stories. I really feel that strongly.
Yeah, I want to thank you for your time. We finished off our reviews with a recommendation. So, what would you pair with Shayda as a double feature?
Any film? Any film. I was lucky enough to meet Almodovar at Toronto Film Festival.
Oh wow!
So I always thought that his film All About My Mother is a really good pairing with Shayda. I love that film so much, and it was definitely an inspiration in when I was writing. So that's my recommendation.
Great, I love that. And if you ever want to tear things apart and shake the table, I'm absolutely here.
Thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you so much for your time, Noora.